The village of Greyvale lay in the cradle of the hills, where fog curled through the streets like smoke, and church bells were the only clocks people trusted. There was no internet, no city rush, just bread, weather, animals, and time. Down a cobbled lane near the chapel square stood a weathered workshop with a faded sign. Bellmaker, R. Holden. Few knew what the R stood for. Fewer still ever stepped inside. The shop smelled of metal and memory. Hammers hung on the walls like relics, and bells of every size lined the shelves, some as large as barrels, others small enough to rest on a fingertip. But none of them rang. Not until they were ready. That's what the old man always said. His name was Ronan Holden. People simply called him the Bellmaker. He was tall and weathered, with a quiet voice that carried the weight of storms. He rarely spoke unless your words rang true, but when he did, it felt like the wind paused to listen. One October morning, a knock came at the shop door. Ronan opened it to find a boy, barely 20, skinny, nervous, with dirt on his sleeves and doubt in his eyes. I heard you take apprentices, the boy stammered. Ronan stared at him a long moment. Name? Thomas. Thomas what? Thomas Crane. The bellmaker stepped aside without another word and pointed to a broom leaning against the wall. The test had begun. For the first few weeks, Ronan said little. Thomas swept, polished, hauled coal, and studied. He learned quickly that Ronan cared about everything. The weight of a strike, the thickness of bronze, the angle of the lip that made a bell sing instead of clunk. Ronan spoke in glances and quiet questions more than commands. The boy sensed he wasn't just being trained, he was being tuned. One evening, after the forge called, Thomas asked, "Why bells?" Without looking up, Ronan replied, "Because nothing hides inside a bell." "I don't understand." Ronan tapped a small silver chime. "A bell rings what it is. No pretending. You strike it and the truth comes out." He turned. Most people never find their true tone. They're full of noise, but no sound. Winter came. The lessons grew stranger. One morning, Ronan handed Thomas a hammer and pointed to a bronze slab. "Shape it." "No mold," Thomas asked. "No mold." Thomas began hammering, fast and eager to impress. But by midday, the metal bulged and thinned in places. It rang like a cracked tin cup. Ronan inspected it, then said, "You tried to finish before you listened." Thomas lowered his eyes. "I just wanted to prove I could. You don't become a bellmaker by being fast. You become one by striking, pausing, and listening." He placed a hand on the warped bronze. "Try again tomorrow, and next time, hear the metal." The tests continued. One day, a merchant from the city visited the shop and offered a contract for 100 bells. "You could make a fortune," he told Ronan. But Ronan politely refused. Outside, Thomas was incredulous. Why not take it? That man wanted quantity, not tone, Ronan said. Noise, not truth. If I chase money, I stop chasing meaning. And the bells, forget how to sing. Thomas sighed. So we'll always be small. Ronan smiled. Small, but sacred. One evening, they sat under the stars outside the shop. Ronan handed Thomas a mug of tea. "Why do you want to be a bell maker?" he asked. Thomas hesitated. "I didn't know where else I belonged. I've tried things, school, trade work, but nothing fit. This feels different. I just don't know if I'm good enough." "You don't have to be the bell," Ronan said. "You just have to hear it." He looked into the fire. "Your gift isn't in what you create, it's in what you notice. Most people walk through life tone deaf to their own purpose. You're learning to listen." One morning, Ronan handed Thomas a box with a tuning fork inside. "The world won't tell you when you're off key," he said. "It will just get louder until you stop listening altogether." Thomas used the fork every day. At first, he heard nothing. But over time, the sound began to echo through his bones. He couldn't explain it, but it was like the fork pointed inward, towards something long buried but always waiting. It wasn't music, it was memory. Everything changed after that. The clang of hammers, the hiss of steam, the shuffle of Ronan's boots, everything became part of a larger rhythm. Thomas moved with presence now, not panic. He felt the forge as much as he used it. One day, while cleaning the back shelves, he found an old, tarnished bell tucked in a drawer. It didn't shine. It was dented and scratched. But when he tapped it lightly, it gave off a tone so clear So haunting, it brought tears to his eyes. He brought it to Ronan. "I found this. It's beautiful." Ronan held it gently. "I made this the year my wife passed." Thomas froze. Ronan nodded. "Poured my grief into it. Not just sorrow, truth. That's what made it sing." He looked at Thomas. "Some bells are made to celebrate, others to mourn. But the most powerful ones, they're made to remember." At last, Ronan gave him the forge. Thomas spent days sketching, then more days revising. He worked in silence, not out of fear, but reverence. He now understood the weight a bell could carry. His design was simple, sincere, not grand, but honest. He poured the bronze himself, shaped the mold, and polished the lip by hand. It was not perfect, but it was real. When it cooled, he placed it gently on the hook. "Will you ring it?" he asked Ronan. But the bellmaker shook his head. "Only you can call it forth." Thomas lifted the striker. The note that rang out was clean, full, warm. It didn't shout, it sang, not just to the room, but to him. Later that evening, Ronan poured 2 mugs of cider and motioned for him to sit. "You found your tone," he said. Thomas smiled. "So I'm ready?" "To begin," which is more than most ever do. Ronan leaned forward. "This world will try to drown your sound. It will tempt you with applause, urgency, imitation. Guard your tone. Live in rhythm with what you know is true." Thomas's voice was quiet. "How do you keep that clarity?" Ronan tapped his chest. "Keep your inner bell in tune. When you're off course, you'll feel the rattle. Learn to listen." He paused, "And when the time comes, pass the hammer. Let someone else hear the echo of who they are." Years passed. One spring evening, a traveler came to the shop. A girl, no older than 20, with ink on her hands and a worn journal in her satchel. She asked softly, "Do you take apprentices?" Thomas, now grown, steady in voice and hand, looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, stepped aside, and pointed to the broom leaning against the wall. The tone had been passed, and so it went. The bellmaker's apprentice became the bellmaker. He never rushed, he never raised his voice, but when he spoke, it struck like truth. And when he asked, "Do you know the tone you carry?" People often didn't, but somehow, in that little shop of bronze and fire,